Bully stole Black Boy's lunch money for 3 years. Froze seeing him on the school board panel. The $5 bill disappeared into Tyler Cross's fist before Malik Bennett even finished pulling it out of his pocket. "Same time tomorrow," Tyler said, flicking Malik's shoulder hard enough to knock him back against the lockers. "You know how this works." Malik was 11 years old, standing in the crowded hallway of Jefferson Middle School, watching the only lunch money he had for the week vanish into another boy's pocket like it belonged there. Nobody stopped it. A few kids looked away. One boy laughed. A teacher passed by 20 feet down the hall, glanced up once, and kept walking without slowing down. "That's mine," Malik said quietly, his voice smaller than he wanted it to be. "My mom worked a double for that." Tyler leaned in close enough that Malik could smell the cafeteria pizza on his breath. "Then tell her to work another one." "Not my problem." The bell rang. The hallway emptied. Malik stood alone against the lockers, stomach already aching with a hunger that wouldn't be answered until dinner, if dinner came at all that night. He didn't know, standing there at 11 years old with empty pockets and a bruised shoulder, that this exact moment would repeat itself. Different hallway, same fist closing around his money, for 3 more years. He didn't know that someday, 14 years from now, in a room full of folding chairs and microphones, Tyler Cross would look up from a stack of interview papers, see Malik's face across the table, and feel every ounce of blood drain out of his own. That day was still a long way off. Today, Malik just walked to class hungry and wondered what he'd done to deserve this. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments. I read as many as I can. And if you enjoy powerful justice stories with unforgettable twists like this one, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more stories like this one. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Malik Bennett grew up in a small brick house on Willow Street in Dayton, Ohio. Raised by a single mother named Denise, who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and the fridge stocked, even if it wasn't always stocked much. Denise cleaned offices downtown from 6 to midnight and worked the register at a corner grocery on weekends. And she taught her son, from the time he could understand her, that kindness cost nothing and mattered more than almost anything else in this world. Malik took that lesson seriously. He was the kind of kid who carried extra pencils for classmates who forgot theirs, who sat with the new student at lunch when nobody else would, who never once, in 11 years of life, had raised his voice at another human being in anger. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of boy teachers described as a pleasure to have in class, on report cards his mother taped proudly to the refrigerator door. He loved building things, model airplanes, birdhouses out of scrap wood his mother brought home from the office building's dumpster, small careful projects that let him disappear into his own patient, steady mind. His father had left when Malik was 4, and Denise never spoke badly of him, only reminded Malik gently that some people simply weren't built for the hard, steady work of staying. Money was tight in a way Malik understood earlier than most kids his age. He knew not to ask for things. He knew to say he wasn't hungry when he actually was. He knew the particular shame of a $5 bill being the only thing standing between him and a decent lunch for the week, tucked carefully into his pocket each Monday morning by a mother who had worked 6 hours the night before to make sure it was there. That $5 bill had started disappearing into Tyler Cross's fist during the fall of 6th grade, and by the time Malik turned 12, it happened so regularly that he'd stopped even flinching when Tyler's hand reached toward his pocket. He never told his mother. He couldn't bear the thought of her working even harder, worrying even more over something he told himself over and over he should be able to handle on his own. He was wrong about that, but it would take him years to understand exactly How wrong! Tyler Cross had been the biggest kid in his grade since the 3rd grade, and somewhere along the way, he'd learned that size came with a kind of currency all its own. His father, Gary Cross, ran the largest construction company in the county and had a reputation for cutting corners and cutting people down, and Tyler had absorbed his father's particular brand of confidence the way some kids absorb kindness, early and completely. At school, Tyler ran with a small group of boys who did whatever he said, not because they respected him, but because the alternative, becoming his next target, was worse than almost anything else middle school had to offer. Teachers mostly looked the other way. Tyler's grades were fine. His behavior in class was fine. Whatever happened in the hallways, in the parking lot after school, in the shadows between one bell and the next, stayed carefully out of sight of anyone with the authority to stop it. He had a system, one he'd refined over 2 full school years. Small kids, quiet kids, kids whose parents worked too many hours to show up at the school demanding answers. Kids like Malik Bennett, who never once told a teacher, never once fought back, never once gave Tyler a reason to think there'd be any consequence at all. Tyler liked Malik especially, liked the quiet way Malik handed over the money without argument, liked the small flinch that passed over Malik's face every single Monday morning, right before Tyler's hand closed around his shoulder in the hallway. It made Tyler feel something he didn't have words for yet, something that would take him years and a room full of folding chairs decades later to finally begin to understand. For now, it just felt like power. And at 13 years old, with a father who ran an entire company by intimidation and a school that never once made him answer for anything, power was the only currency Tyler Cross had ever learned to value. He had no idea, standing in that crowded hallway taking Malik's lunch money for the 40th or 50th time, that the quiet boy in front of him would someday sit across a table from him holding something far more powerful than any fist ever could. The worst day came in the spring of 7th grade, in the middle of the school cafeteria, in front of nearly 200 witnesses. Malik had been saving. For 3 weeks, he'd skipped lunch entirely, hiding in the library instead, telling the librarian he preferred reading to eating, all so he could hold on to enough money to buy his mother a birthday present. A small ceramic bluebird he'd seen in the window of the thrift shop on 5th Street. The kind of thing she'd stop and admire every time they walked past. He'd finally saved $12, folded carefully into his shoe instead of his pocket, certain that this time Tyler wouldn't find it. Tyler found it anyway. "Take off your shoe," Tyler said, cornering him near the cafeteria trash cans, 2 of his friends blocking the path on either side. "I know it's in there. Kevin saw you counting it in the bathroom." "Please," Malik said, and for the first time in 3 years, his voice cracked in front of everyone. "It's for my mom's birthday. Please, Tyler. Please, not this one." The cafeteria had gone quieter than usual, kids nearby slowly noticing what was happening, phones not yet common enough in middle school pockets to capture it the way they would today, but eyes turning anyway, watching. Tyler smiled, and it was the smile that Malik would remember clearest of all. Years later. Not cruel exactly, not even angry, just utterly, completely unbothered by the tears now sliding down an 11-year-old's face in front of the entire 7th grade. "Shoo," Tyler said again. "Now." Malik bent down, hands shaking, and pulled the folded bills out from beneath his heel, holding them out because there was nothing else left to do. No teacher close enough, no friend brave enough, no version of this moment where the money stayed in his hand. Tyler took it without a word and walked away laughing with his friends, leaving Malik standing alone by the trash cans, $12 poorer, his mother's birthday present now impossible, his dignity scattered across a cafeteria floor in front of 200 kids who had all, in one way or another, chosen to look away. A lunch aide finally noticed him crying and asked if he was all right. Malik said he was fine. He said the same thing he always said. He never told his mother why there was no present that year. He told her he forgot her birthday, which was, in its own quiet way, the first real lie he'd ever told her. And it hurt him almost as much as the $12 had. That night, sitting alone in his room, Malik made a promise to himself that he wouldn't fully understand the shape of for another 14 years. Someday, he thought, staring at the ceiling, someone like me is going to be in charge. And when that day comes, I'm going to remember exactly what this felt like. The bullying continued for 2 more years, through the rest of middle school and into the first year of high school, though it changed shape slightly as Malik grew taller, as Tyler's crowd expanded, as the stakes shifted from lunch money into smaller, meaner cruelties that left less obvious evidence behind. By 9th grade, Malik had learned to make himself small in hallways, to time his movements around Tyler's schedule, to survive 3 more years of a system that had never once intervened. Then, in the spring of Malik's freshman year, something unexpected happened. A new guidance counselor named Ms. Rachel Wilson transferred into Jefferson High from a district 2 counties over, and within her first month, she noticed something the previous counselors apparently never had. She noticed the way Malik Bennett flinched every time Tyler Cross walked past his locker. She noticed the pattern in the attendance records. The days Malik missed lunch entirely, always clustering around days Tyler's name appeared in hallway incident logs for entirely unrelated things. She called Malik into her office on a Tuesday afternoon, and for the first time in 3 years, someone finally asked him directly, with patience and without judgment, what was actually happening. Malik didn't want to say it at first. 3 years of silence had built its own kind of wall, and tearing it down felt, somehow, more frightening than the bullying itself. But Ms. Wilson waited. She didn't rush him. She simply sat there, steady and unhurried, until finally, slowly, the whole story came out. The lunch money, the shoe, the birthday present that never happened. 3 years compressed into 20 quiet, trembling minutes. Ms. Wilson didn't promise him it would be easy. She promised him it would finally be documented, investigated, and addressed, properly this time, with witnesses interviewed and a paper trail that couldn't simply be looked away from. It took another 6 weeks of investigation before Tyler Cross was formally suspended, his father storming into the principal's office twice, threatening lawsuits that never materialized, insisting his son had been unfairly targeted by a kid who was obviously making things up for attention. The suspension lasted 10 days. Tyler came back angrier than before, though the direct extortion mostly stopped, not because he'd changed, Malik suspected, but because he'd simply gotten smarter about not getting caught. Malik graduated high school 3 years later without ever exchanging another word with Tyler Cross, the two of them moving through separate hallways, separate lives, until the day their paths would cross again, in a way neither of them could have predicted. Malik went on to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, majoring in education, driven by a version of purpose that had been quietly forming in him since that cafeteria floor in 7th grade. A conviction that no kid should ever have to survive what he'd survived without someone in the room willing to notice. He became a teacher first, then a vice principal. Then, 11 years after graduating high school, the youngest elected member of the Dayton Regional School Board in its history, running on a platform built almost entirely around student safety, anti-bullying policy reform, and accountability for adults who looked away. His campaign speeches never mentioned Tyler Cross by name, but anyone who'd known Malik back in middle school would have recognized exactly where the fire in those speeches came from. Denise Bennett sat in the front row the night her son was sworn in, wearing a small ceramic bluebird pin on her jacket, one Malik had finally bought her, 11 years late, the Christmas after he graduated college, along with an apology he didn't need to give but gave anyway. "You already gave me everything I needed," she'd told him that night, holding the little bluebird carefully in her palm. "You grew up decent. That was always the only present I wanted." Malik built his career on quiet, steady competence. The same qualities that had made him such an easy target as a child had, somehow, become the foundation of a reputation for fairness that few people in local education could match. Parents trusted him. Teachers trusted him. Even the district's harshest critics admitted, however reluctantly, that Malik Bennett never made a decision without thoroughly earning it first. He rarely spoke publicly about his own childhood. It wasn't shame, not anymore. It was simply that the story felt too personal to hand over to strangers, too easily flattened into a tidy, inspirational anecdote that missed the years of hunger and silence underneath it. He kept that story close, the way some people keep an old photograph in a drawer. Not hidden exactly, just private, waiting for the right moment to matter again. That moment arrived on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, 14 years after the cafeteria floor, in a conference room with folding chairs and a stack of interview folders, when the district's hiring committee sat down to review candidates for the head coaching position at Jefferson High School. Malik didn't recognize the name on the first folder right away. Names changed. People moved. 14 years was a long time. But when the third candidate walked through the door for his interview, broad-shouldered and confident in a way that hadn't changed one bit since 7th grade, Malik Bennett felt every hallway, every locker, every stolen dollar come rushing back at once. "Tyler Cross," the man said, extending a hand across the table with the easy, practiced charm of someone used to being liked on sight. "Thank you all for having me. I'm excited about the opportunity to lead the football program here at Jefferson." He hadn't looked up yet. He was scanning his own resume, laid out neatly in front of him, rehearsing the confident opening he'd clearly practiced in the car. Malik sat at the far end of the table, one member among 5 on the hiring committee, and said nothing for a long moment, letting the room settle, letting his own pulse slow before he trusted his voice. "Mr. Cross," said the committee chair, a woman named Patricia Nguyen, who had chaired hiring panels for 11 years without ever once losing her composure. "Why don't you walk us through your coaching philosophy, starting with how you handle conflict among student-athletes?" Tyler smiled, launching easily into an answer clearly polished across a dozen previous interviews. Words like accountability and mentorship and building character, phrases that would have sounded convincing to almost anyone who hadn't once stood in a cafeteria watching this exact man take $12 out of a child's shoe. Malik listened, jaw tight, hands folded carefully on the table in front of him. "And how do you handle situations," Patricia continued, glancing down at her notes, "where a student-athlete reports being bullied or mistreated by a teammate?" Tyler's answer came smooth and immediate. "Zero tolerance. I don't play favorites, and I don't let anything slide. Every kid on my team gets treated with respect. No exceptions." It was, Malik thought, almost impressive. The sheer, practiced confidence of a man who had clearly said those words so many times he'd started to believe them himself. "Interesting," Malik said quietly, speaking for the first time since Tyler had walked into the room. Tyler turned toward the voice at the end of the table, his easy smile still fixed in place, and looked directly at Malik Bennett for the first time in 14 years. The smile didn't fall right away. For a moment, Malik watched something flicker behind Tyler's eyes. Recognition trying and failing to fully surface, a half-formed sense that this face was familiar without yet understanding why. "I'm sorry," Tyler said slowly. "Have we met before?" "We have," Malik said, his voice level and calm in a way that surprised even him. "Jefferson Middle School, 6th through 8th grade." The color drained from Tyler Cross's face in real time. The practiced confidence collapsing like a building with its foundation suddenly gone. And for the first time in 14 years, Malik Bennett watched the boy who had taken everything from him freeze completely still. The silence in that conference room stretched long enough that Patricia Nguyen finally cleared her throat, glancing between Malik and Tyler with visible confusion. "I'm sorry. Is there something we should be aware of here?" Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. His hand, resting on the table, had gone slightly unsteady. The confident posture from 30 seconds earlier now entirely gone. "Malik," he said finally, his voice quieter than any version of it Malik remembered from childhood. "Malik Bennett." "That's right," Malik said. Understanding moved slowly across the rest of the committee's faces. Not full understanding yet, just the growing awareness that something significant had just shifted in the room, something none of them had context for. "You two know each other," said another committee member, a soft-spoken man named David Park. "We went to school together," Tyler said quickly, reaching for something that sounded neutral, harmless. "Years ago." Malik said nothing at first, letting that half-truth sit in the room for a moment before deciding, deliberately, not to let it stand uncorrected. "We did," Malik said. "Mr. Cross took my lunch money for 3 straight years, starting in 6th grade. He took $12 out of my shoe in front of 200 kids in the cafeteria when I was in 7th grade. Money I'd saved for 3 weeks to buy my mother a birthday present. He was suspended for 10 days in 9th grade after a formal investigation confirmed a pattern of extortion and intimidation against at least 4 other students, myself included." The room had gone completely silent. Patricia set down her pen slowly. David Park's expression had shifted into something between shock and disbelief. Tyler sat frozen in his chair, his earlier confidence nowhere to be found, replaced by the particular stillness of a man watching his entire, carefully built narrative collapse in real time. That was a long time ago," Tyler said finally, his voice thin. "Kids do stupid things. I was 13. "You were 13 when it started," Malik said evenly. "You were 15 when it finally stopped, and only because a counselor happened to notice what 4 different teachers hadn't." "I've changed," Tyler said, something almost pleading creeping into his voice now. "I have kids of my own. I coach youth league on the weekends. I'm not that person anymore." Malik studied him for a long moment, and there was no cruelty in his expression, no satisfaction at watching Tyler unravel. Only a kind of tired, steady clarity that had taken 14 years to fully settle into place. "Maybe you have changed," Malik said quietly. "I hope, genuinely, that you have. But this committee isn't just hiring a football coach today. We're hiring someone to hold direct authority over children the exact same age I was when you took $12 out of my shoe. That's not a decision I can make based on hope." Patricia Nguyen called for a short recess, and the committee members filed out into the hallway, leaving Tyler alone in the conference room for several long, silent minutes. Malik stepped outside into the afternoon sun, taking a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since Tyler first walked through that door. Patricia found him a moment later, leaning against the brick wall outside the district office, her expression careful and concerned. "Malik," she said gently, "I need to ask. Is this something you're able to be objective about? I have to ask, given the history." It was a fair question, and Malik respected her enough to answer it honestly. "I've thought about that exact question for the last 10 minutes, he said, "and here's what I know for certain, separate from anything personal. Before today's interviews, we pulled standard background checks on every candidate, same as always. Mr. Cross's came back clean. No criminal record, nothing disqualifying on paper. But," Patricia said, hearing the weight behind his pause. "But I made a call during the recess," Malik said, to a colleague at the district Tyler currently coaches for, 2 counties over. Off the record, just checking in professionally. Nothing about our history here. She told me they've had 3 separate parent complaints filed against him in the last 2 years. All quietly resolved, none of them formally documented in a way that would show up on a standard reference check. Patricia's expression sharpened. Complaints about what, specifically? Favoritism. Verbal intimidation toward players who don't perform the way he wants. One complaint specifically mentioned a 12-year-old benched for an entire season after his father couldn't afford to pay for a private training camp Tyler personally profits from running. The recess hallway went quiet around them, the weight of that information settling in. "That's not proof of anything disqualifying," Patricia said slowly, thinking it through. "Not on its own." "No," Malik agreed, "which is exactly why I'm not asking this committee to reject him based on what happened between us 14 years ago. I'm asking that we formally request his complete complaint history from his current district before we make any final decision, the same standard we'd apply to any candidate, regardless of who they are or who I happen to know them to be." Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's fair. That's more than fair, actually." She turned back toward the conference room door, pausing before she opened it. "For what it's worth, Malik, I'm sorry. Whatever happened to you back then, I'm sorry nobody stopped it sooner." Malik managed a small, tired smile. "Somebody finally did. That's the part that matters now." The formal request for Tyler's complete complaint history took 11 days to process. And when it finally arrived, it painted a picture far more troubling than the 3 informal complaints Malik's colleague had mentioned. There were 7 formal complaints on file across Tyler's 6 years of coaching, 4 of which had been quietly settled through private mediation rather than formal disciplinary action, each one involving strikingly similar patterns. Favoritism toward players whose families paid for his private training sessions, and increasingly harsh treatment toward players whose families couldn't. One complaint, filed just 8 months earlier by a mother named Jennifer Ortiz, described her 13-year-old son being publicly humiliated in front of his entire team for missing a private camp session the family couldn't afford. Tyler reportedly telling the boy, in front of his teammates, that some kids just aren't built for this level. Reading that complaint, Malik felt something cold settle in his chest. Not surprise exactly, but a heavy, quiet confirmation of a pattern he'd feared was there all along. The hiring committee reconvened the following week, this time with the full complaint history laid out on the table, alongside Tyler's original application. Patricia opened the meeting by reading each complaint aloud, unemotionally, letting the pattern speak for itself. "I want to be clear," Patricia said finally, setting the folder down, "that this committee's decision today has nothing to do with any personal history between Mr. Cross and any individual committee member. It has everything to do with a documented 6-year pattern of conduct that this district cannot, in good conscience, bring into a position of direct authority over children." The vote was unanimous. Tyler Cross would not be offered the coaching position. The decision was communicated to him formally, in writing, by the district's Human Resources Office rather than the committee directly. A professional courtesy Malik had specifically requested, understanding that whatever else Tyler was, this moment didn't need an audience to be effective. But word travels in small communities. And within 2 weeks, Jennifer Ortiz and 2 other parents from Tyler's current district, emboldened by the news that a formal complaint history had finally been taken seriously somewhere, filed a joint report with their own district's Athletic Oversight Board, requesting a full review of Tyler's 6-year coaching record. That review was still ongoing 3 months later. But for the first time in 6 years, Tyler Cross's pattern was finally being examined in daylight, instead of quietly settled in private meetings designed to make problems disappear rather than solve them. Malik didn't see Tyler Cross again after the hiring decision Not directly. But 4 months later, he received an unexpected letter at his district office, handwritten, no return address beyond a city 2 counties over. He almost didn't open it. Some part of him braced for anger, for blame, for the kind of bitter deflection Tyler had reached for in that conference room. Instead, the letter said something Malik hadn't expected at all. Malik, I've spent a long time since that interview trying to understand why seeing you in that room hit me the way it did. I told myself for years that what happened in middle school was just kids being kids. Sitting across from you, hearing you say it out loud, in that room, in that voice. I couldn't tell myself that story anymore. I'm not writing this to ask for anything. I know that's not something you owe me. I'm writing because the athletic board review made me actually look at my own coaching record for the first time in 6 years, instead of just defending it. And what I saw wasn't good. I've withdrawn from coaching entirely, at least for now. I'm in counseling, trying to understand where all of it actually came from. My dad, myself, all of it. I don't expect this to fix anything for you. I know it can't. I just needed you to know that what happened in that room mattered. It's the first time in 14 years anybody made me actually look at it, instead of look away from it. Tyler. Malik read the letter twice, sitting alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home for the evening, feeling something complicated settle over him that wasn't quite forgiveness and wasn't quite closure, but was, perhaps, the beginning of both. He didn't write back right away. Some things, he'd learned, needed time to settle before they could be answered honestly, but he did fold the letter carefully and place it in the same desk drawer where he kept the report card his mother had once taped to their refrigerator door, and the small photograph of the ceramic bluebird pin she still wore to every important occasion in his life. Different kinds of proof, all of them, that the long, quiet work of growing into who you were meant to be, even after everything tried to convince you otherwise, was possible after all. That spring, Malik stood at a podium in the Jefferson High School auditorium, delivering the keynote address at the district's first annual Student Safety and Anti-Bullying Summit, a program he'd championed since his earliest days on the school board. Denise sat in the front row, the small bluebird pin catching the stage lights as she watched her son speak, pride written openly across her face in a way she'd never once tried to hide. 14 years ago, Malik told the packed auditorium, I was a 6th grader who lost his lunch money in a hallway almost every week, and I never told a single adult because I didn't believe anyone would actually do anything about it. The room had gone quiet, 300 students and parents and teachers listening closely. I was wrong about that eventually, Malik continued, but it took 3 years and a counselor who happened to notice a pattern nobody else was looking for. 3 years is too long. It should never take that long for a kid to be believed. He looked out over the crowd, finding Denise's eyes in the front row, and allowed himself a small, steady smile before continuing. The policies we're announcing today, mandatory reporting protocols, anonymous tip lines, staff training that actually gets renewed every single year instead of once and forgotten, none of it is about punishment for its own sake. It's about making sure that no kid in this district ever again has to carry a secret alone for 3 years, hoping someone finally notices. The applause that followed lasted longer than Malik expected, and standing there at that podium, in the same building where he'd once hidden in a library, rather than face another hallway, he felt something settle into place that had been unsettled for a very long time. Not victory exactly. Something quieter and more lasting than that. Peace. So tell us, where are you watching from tonight? And what would you have done if you were sitting on that hiring panel across from Tyler? Do you think his letter was sincere? Or do you think Malik was right to keep his guard up? And what did you think of Denise's bluebird pin showing up again at the very end? Let us know your favorite moment down in the comments. We read every single one. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how long it takes. We'll see you in the next story.